Welcome to the show, ladies.
Hi, Gracie.
Hi,
Hey,
Gracie.
So this is a new one for us. We are all on the radio show, which is, of course, is also a podcast all the time, and it's also now a YouTube channel. We have our own channel, ladies, and
Wow.
this is our debut, our big debut. So I think it's going to go wonderfully, and we've chosen a really great topic. We are going to be talking about the Ohio ballot initiative, which maybe you've read about it in the news, maybe you haven't. It's a little complicated. And Ashley, our own Ashley, has been following very closely and writing it up. It's an abortion ballot initiative. Here in Conversations with Consequences at the Catholic Association, we pay a lot of attention to all these efforts to protect life, starting at conception. So the struggle against abortion, which has actually gotten so much more complicated since Dobbs. We were all waiting for the end of Roe v. Wade because it was going to be this amazingly liberating moment. Well, it sort of landed us in a more swampy place where every single state's a battleground, and Ohio happens to be a really important battleground for this post-Dobbs era. So, Ashley, putting you on the hot seat, tell us what's going on in Ohio. Give us some quick strokes about that.
Sure. Well, it really is the state to watch right now because the tactic that the abortion lobby is using in Ohio right now is the tactic that they're using, that they've used in a few other states around the country, and that they're obviously using as a model for the way forward. And it's really it's duplicitous because it basically deceives voters with a ballot initiative that just requires a simple majority to pass to amend the Constitution to say that no law can be passed that in any way hinders reproductive access. They use language that I think sounds appealing to most voters, but in fact, what it means is that there cannot be any laws if this initiative passes that in any way protect babies, protect women. We're talking health and safety standards in abortion clinics. We're talking outlawing barbaric, painful late-term abortions. It basically strips away choice for voters, which is exactly what the Dobbs ruling was about, which was about returning the issue of abortion back to the people, giving voters a say for the first time in more than half of a century on this issue of deep moral consequence. And they're trying to come in through the side door and take it away, ironically, in the name of voter choice. And I think we're talking about this today because the timing of this is at the same time that a new study came out and found that 70% of women felt pressured into their abortions. And so what this would do is basically make abortion the sort of de facto status quo in a state like Ohio, remove any say for voters moving forward ever on the issue of abortion, and just make women feel that much more pressured into abortions that they don't want to have.
Ashley, what is it that women would prefer? Is the parenting that they feel that they're not supported enough or pressured not to do? Do you think it's, because of their partners, their lack of a partner, the silent stigma of of single parenting? What is it the 2 out of 3 women who felt coerced in this peer-reviewed study felt like?
I think it's all of the things that you mentioned. I mean, I think economic issues are probably one of the leading reasons, as well as feeling a lack of support, not having a supportive partner. And these are things that we can help women with. We know that we have the tools in this country to help women with these things. You look at states that have really put in place strong protections for unborn babies and for women, places like Texas, and they've done that in conjunction with tens of millions of dollars of support for places like pregnancy resource centers, houses where, many of these places which will actually help women through the first months, even years of being a mom, women who want to have the baby, but feel like because of financial reasons or lack of support that they can't. So, I think it's all of the things that you mentioned, but what's so tragic about these ballot initiatives is they move the energy away from supporting women and into pressuring women, and really sort of gives the pimps, the boyfriends who just want to walk away the upper hand, because that becomes the status quo instead of, taking the approach of, wow, 2 in 3 women who have abortions don't want to. How can we use our resources in this country to help them make the choice that they want to choose, which also happens to be the choice that affirms the dignity of unborn life.
Ashley, when you were saying that this initiative, if it makes it, will strip any chance of making any regulations around abortion. One thing that popped to mind was parental notification, which to me, it's just such a no-brainer, right? Even if you are if you're very comfortable, if you're very pro-choice, you're very comfortable with abortion, you would still feel very strongly that parents ought to know if maybe they have a minor daughter who's being trafficked or abused, a boyfriend that's maybe doing this for the 3rd time this year, right? Like taking her to Planned Parenthood for the 3rd time, and she's fallen into hands where she doesn't belong. So are even like common sense things like parental notification or the kind of regulations that would have prevented the horrible Gosnell abortion, just the horror show that was, his clinic in Philadelphia where he was committing murders, but nobody would go check, right? Nobody was following up on complaints. So could Ohio be opening itself up to these kinds of things?
Yeah, it would potentially make Ohio among the most extreme states in the country on abortion. We've seen after the fall of Roe v. Wade that there's a range of, voter preferences on this issue. But, as you say, even voters who support, something like first trimester abortion, they still also support things like outlawing by very strong margins, outlawing barbaric late term abortions, basic common sense health and safety regulations and standards for abortion clinics, holding them to the same, health and safety standards as a place where you're going to go get your toe surgery, things like that. And as you point out, parental notification and parents' rights. It's all couched in a lot of language that sounds moderate, but in fact, it's a very, its results would be very extreme. And I think not what the voters of Ohio want, and definitely totally out of step with where the voters in this country are on the issue, which is they support protecting women, protecting babies, and ultimately want to have a say again in their state's laws and the way that they handle this issue. And it's so important to get back to that what this would do is strip that away. It's basically like signing away your rights moving forward to vote on the issue, because you're saying that anything that in any way is deemed any sort of a burden on reproductive access is outlawed moving forward. And it's, written into the state constitution, which is very hard to go back and alter.
Ashley, can you explain why the new battleground seems to be these ballot initiatives? Why is the abortion lobby pushing them? Why are they having such success? And, you mentioned Ohio, it's such a pro-life state. So it's really curious that that this is such an uphill climb. And you mentioned language, which I think is probably part of the key to why the other side is winning. The abortion lobby is also so well funded, so I'm sure we get outspent on most of these ballot initiatives. But can you tell us a little bit about the battle over the language? Because we all know that language shapes the way we think about things, and when things are worded in a different way, you get a very different outcome in terms of the vote on the ballot initiative. So can you explain that? What's going on? Because I know there's a lot of back and forth on the language of the Ohio ballot initiative.
Right. Yeah, I saw that the language of the actual initiative now is going to include the word unborn child. And so the abortion lobby is suing over that. They wanted to say fetus, but what to me that suggests is theirs is a game of deception and distraction. And so, in the same way they talk about undue burden, reproductive rights, fetus, it's all about sort of glossing over the reality of what the bill is about. They don't want people to even be thinking about the fact that this involves unborn children. And so that's really been, when you look at any of these polls, when they poll about the various, different state level pieces of legislation that have come down, the way you ask, the way you question people matters a lot. Like if you ask voters, do you support protecting unborn life after a heartbeat is detected, you'd be shocked at the number of Americans that say yes. But if you poll them and say, do you support overturning Roe v. Wade, that gets a little more dicey because people don't understand, I think, what overturning Roe v. Wade actually meant, which was, no, it didn't mean every form of abortion is illegal in every state in this country moving forward. It just means that now the issue is returned back to the states. So it is really a battle of semantics. And I think that, the other side, the abortion lobby, is, they understand that they've lost at the Supreme Court. And so they have to go to the different states and find ways of putting, I think they sense that people don't, they're uncomfortable with the idea of, there being no access to abortion whatsoever, which, we're in totally new territory for the first time in half of a century in this country. It's understandable that people are very susceptible to talks about extremes. And they're really, they're playing on that. But ultimately it's about using deceptive language. And I think what's so sinister about these ballot initiatives is that they're basically getting people to vote away their own rights. By making them think that they feel like I have a choice in this matter. They're actually getting people to sign away their rights to ever have a choice or a say in those issues again, or at least, making it extremely difficult to ever get that back.
And the abortion lobby, I'm sorry, Lee.
No, you please go ahead, Maureen.
I was just going to follow up on the question about language, because for 50 years, the abortion lobby has been so successful in framing the issue in terms of choice and rights. And so I was so encouraged to see that the ballot board, I guess it was, in Ohio was tweaking the language to more accurately reflect the reality of abortion. And so changing fetus to unborn child. And I guess there was language about viability, because the abortion lobby wants to word the ballot initiative to say abortion will be allowed until viability, and then only with certain exceptions for health situations. But of course, that's very deceptive, because any language about health in abortion law is like a loophole you could drive a truck through. It could be emotional health, familial health. I have 3 kids, or
economic health.
Economic health. I can't afford another
Social
child, health. Or right. So the Ohio ballot board, I think, is trying to change the language to make it more accurately reflect the fact that under this initiative, abortion would be allowed past viability for virtually any reason, and the determination is made by the abortion doctor, him or herself. So, hardly an objective party in the situation. So I'm glad to see the pro-life side is kind of on to the deceptive language in the underlying initiative.
And let's not forget that the AP, maybe 3-4 months ago, changed its style book to refer to pregnancy resource centers as anti-abortion. Another example of the way that, if you have the upper hand on language, you really get to frame the debate. And, that's such a inaccurate way of labeling these centers, which are, truly pro-women.
That's like saying Chick-fil-A is anti-beef. Just because they don't sell hamburgers.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
But
what do we give away at pregnancy resource centers? We give away all these supports and encouragements and love and assistance to help women do what they want to do. They're only there because they want to keep the child.
Yeah, that actually is perfect segue into my question that I had for Ashley. Is there any language in the ballot initiative, or simultaneously are they going after these pregnancy crisis centers in Ohio the way we've seen it done in other states? in terms of their status, in terms of their protection. I mean, we know, like Maureen said, Ohio's been a pro-life state. They've got safe haven laws on the books. Is there anything that's happening with the pregnancy crisis centers there?
Not that I know of, at least with this initiative explicitly, but it's kind of an interesting point. Like, could they get caught in the crosshairs of being, an undue burden? Like, let's say you counsel a woman, like, into, not you give a woman some counseling that ultimately supports the decision to keep a child, like, I don't know. But I mean, I think that the bottom line is, again, to go back to that stunning study that found that 70% of women who have had abortions, and this was a very comprehensive study. This wasn't some small thing. This was, a very large study with very stark and decisive results that found that basically women in this country don't want to have abortions, and they feel pressured into it. And that should be setting off alarm bells for all of us, including people who, self-identify as pro-choice, because, this is not a pro-choice country. If most women felt pressured into their abortions, like, again, how does that differentiate us from these extremist regimes, which are, quite literally forcing women into abortions? It's just a different type of forced abortion. It's a different type of pressure, but it's real, and the outcome is the same: a dead baby and an unhappy woman who wanted to keep her baby. And so these ballot initiatives do absolutely nothing to help those women. And I would argue, and I did argue in my op-ed, that it actually exacerbates a climate of abortion pressure for women.
We're going to put a link to your op-ed in the show notes, and I encourage all our listeners and viewers to look at that. It's an excellent piece. And another thing, Ashley, I was thinking, so this initiative in Ohio, if passed, would add a new section to the state constitution, as you mentioned, that would create a right to reproductive freedom. And I was thinking, I'm very aware as a physician about all the ways that medical science it's hard for me to talk about medicine and abortion at the same time because they're antithetical in many ways. But ways that science is continuously changing and offering us new possibilities. So, for instance, they did a uterine transplant on a woman in England a couple of weeks ago that was successful. I don't think successful to the point that she's having a child anytime soon, but at least she's keeping the organ for now. And so it's a Pandora's box in a sense. Like, there's all these possibilities coming up, but Ohio voters will have tied their own hands. So imagine somebody coming forward and saying, my right to reproductive freedom as a man includes having, a uterus transplant on taxpayer expense, right? I can imagine a scenario where they would say, oh yeah, that's reproductive freedom, freedom to reproduce. Maybe that sounds like an outlier, or something that could never happen. But let's face it, we're surrounded right now in our culture by things that were never supposed to happen, that were too crazy to happen, and they're happening all around us, everywhere we look. What do you think about that, about voters tying their hands before huge changes in science?
Well, and another issue with this ballot initiative is it gets to parents' rights on some of these other, what if your teenage child, your 12, 13-year-old daughter, decides that she's, been swept up in this gender ideology stuff and wants surgery? There's, this could potentially strip away parents' rights on that front. So, parents' rights,
right? And
it's a huge
kind
part
of reproductive freedom, right? To
Definitely.
say, well, I'm going to reproduce as a male instead of a female.
No, and I think you should put nothing past the motives of the people behind this initiative. Mm-hmm. They are anti-parents' rights. They are anti-life. And they are pulling out all the stops to do anything that advances that agenda. So, if you're a voter who values those things, this is a serious issue to watch.
So, Ashley, I guess the Ohio ballot initiative has been a little bit complicated because there was an August vote, and now there's going to be another vote in November. And I saw that President Biden weighed in after the August vote, talking about the freedom of women to make their own healthcare decisions. And he was using all-encompassing language that, like you raised, the concern that this can, healthcare decisions, when you're talking about minors, there is such a craze in this transgender movement. So I think it's a very real thing that kids could get swept up into that, and that parents would have no rights to weigh in. And, President Biden, it's a little unusual to have the president of the United States weighing in on this seemingly little ballot initiative in Ohio in the middle of August when no one's even paying attention. So I do think this is a real priority for the abortion lobby. And, I'm wondering what can our listeners in Ohio do to help educate their fellow citizens, and any good action items that people can take?
Well, President Biden is as he's bought and sold by the abortion lobby. He's a total extremist. I mean, if anything, he really represents where the Democrat Party is on this issue, which is to the complete far left extreme.
Can I make a parenthetical? This is a Catholic show. He's a Catholic. That's just parenthetical. And he carries his rosary beads, but I sometimes it's like that wakes me up in the middle of the night. Sometimes we have a Catholic president and he's 100% abortion boosting.
Well, it's a cause of extreme scandal. That's for sure. But no, I mean, this is really a grassroots moment. I mean, we've had similar bills put on the ballot here in Maryland where I live, and my church has put out things in the back that they break down the language with bold and underline, explaining to people what this actually means. And I think it's important to not just explain what the language, their deceptive language means, but what the outcomes are, and to keep people focused on that. Like, this is what it means practically for parents' rights. This is what it means for late-term abortion, because that helps voters. So they've put out things like voter guides in the back of church. And so, I think as Catholics, we're called to work to defend the common good. And these ballot initiatives are completely antithetical to the common good. And there is, we're actually called to, work to prevent, laws that would dramatically harm the common good and innocent life.
Pay attention to the headlines in your own state. And also on the federal level, there is a great bill to support women in need who are pregnant and in a crisis. And it's called the Providing for Life Act. It's being sponsored in the House by Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, who's a young mom from Iowa. I think she's in her third term in Congress.
We have to have her on the show, Maureen.
Oh, we should.
You must connect us.
We should. And Senator Marco Rubio is the main sponsor in the Senate. So any of our listeners who live anywhere can write to their member of Congress and to U.S. senators urging support for this pro-life safety net bill called the Providing for Life Act, sponsored by Congresswoman Ashley Hinson.
Sounds absolutely lovely. What could be better than providing for life? And thank you, Ashley, for all this wonderful information. We brought you out of your maternity retirement. You've been away, taking good care of your new baby. So we're really happy to see you and to hear your voice. So thank you, all of you ladies, for today, for joining me on Conversations with Consequences.